gaming industry has been home to many companies over the years. While nowadays we primarily think of the big four, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Valve, there have been plenty of others. Anyone remember when Atari was at the top of the industry? How quickly things change. Of course, it stands to reason that these companies will compete with each other, fighting tooth and nail to prove their superiority over the competition and drive sales of their own product. In Microsoft's case, this is currently biting them in the ass. The recent FTC court case that Microsoft and the entire Xbox brand is embroiled in inspired me to make this video, because the news coming out of this story is honestly kind of insane. If you don't know, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing about it now if you do know, Xbox has been attempting to purchase Activision-blizzard-king for quite a while now. If this deal went through, it would give Xbox complete control over all of their properties such as Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Candy Crush. As you can probably guess, this has not gone over well with not only their competitors, but also Federal Trade Commission legislators. What has followed in the ensuing court case is a wild and tangled web of corporate drama. So much has been revealed about both Microsoft and Sony due to their legal filings and various emails that have made it out to the public. But it's one statement that Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, made during an appearance on Kinda Funny's Xcast that really made me want to make this video.
We're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution or win for us. And I know that will upset a ton of people, but it's just the truth of the matter is that when you're third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are and have, in certain cases, very discrete focus on doing deals and other things that will that kind of make being Xbox hard for us as a team. That's on us, not on anybody else.
I agree with Spencer here. Xbox is in a very distant third place in this market. But why is that? He makes a very good point that Sony and Nintendo making deals with other companies could make it difficult for Xbox, who historically doesn't get as many of those deals. So the question is, how did they end up in this position? Why is it that Xbox isn't as respected as their other two major competitors? Why are they in third place? I've been thinking about this question for a while, and I've come up with three potential primary answers for this. A poor brand identity from the beginning, a failure to capture overseas markets, and a complete lack of identity in 2023. Just so we're clear, this is all my perspective. I'm not some bigwig financial expert or CEO. I'm just your average gaming fan who loves the gaming industry, and I wanted to provide my thoughts as someone who hasn't bought an Xbox since the 360 days. Strap in, folks, because this is going to be an interesting one. First up is Xbox's poor brand identity at their inception. I want you to think back to 2001 when the Xbox was released. What was the brand's brand identity at that point? Well, it was kinda toxic. I really mean that. For years, Xbox branded itself as the edgy and cool console where you could play violent games for adults. This was the only place where you could play the hot new shooter game Halo, or see sexy girls in Dead or Alive. Ads like this one for Xbox Live were put out showing these hardcore gamer kids shit-talking each other in lobbies. It wasn't like this was just the original Xbox either. This was up until the Xbox One generation. I can remember having an Xbox 360 and running into this exact same thing. Xbox's entire identity from the very beginning was being a hardcore, toxic gamer's paradise. I'm sure that sounded great at the beginning, but here's the thing. Those kids in that video, they grew up. They grew up, and so did everyone else. Normal, well-functioning adults don't act like assholes in Call of Duty party lobbies. They play their games and leave it at that. The gaming community has, for the most part, attempted to grow out of that era. People are generally more accepting than they used to be and far less toxic. Platforms like PlayStation and Nintendo are generally viewed as more inviting for this reason. Nintendo is much more family-friendly on the whole, and PlayStation focuses more on a variety of different kinds of games, especially strong single-player content with more depth and value. Xbox didn't have that focus for years. Xbox truly was just the console you bought because your friends had one. It wasn't the console where you could go to experience strong single-player adventures or family-friendly fun straight from Japan. It was the console where you could play in toxic lobbies, hyper-violent first-party games, and whatever games the third-party companies were shoveling out. If you were one of those people, I'm happy for you. If you enjoyed that era of gaming, more power to you. But frankly, I'm happy that this community is trying to move past it. Games should be enjoyed by everyone, not just this kid. Xbox basically dug themselves into a giant hole for years, and now they're just trying to dig themselves back out. They've recently tried to rebrand as being a console for everybody, but it's a pretty hard thing to do when you were the opposite for so many years. You may say, NightParadox, what about the Kinect? Wasn't that their attempt to appeal to more people? Yeah, what about the Kinect? That failure of a peripheral that nobody liked by the time of the Xbox One generation, to the point where Xbox themselves dropped it almost immediately after that console launched? If that was their attempt to reach more people than just the audience that they cultivated, then it was a colossal failure. Fuck the Kinect. All my homies hate the Kinect. Piggybacking off of this point is my second reason for why Xbox currently sits in third place: their inability to capture overseas markets. In particular, I want to talk about Japan. Japan, while not being the birthplace of video games by any means, is certainly the heir to the throne. Both Nintendo and Sony come straight from Japan, as do many of the largest third-party gaming companies. Bitch and moan about Nintendo all you want, doesn't change the fact that if they had not released the NES in 1983, we would probably not be playing video games at all right now. To this day, Japan has continued to be one of the most important markets to capture for any game console. It's sad then that it's almost a meme how hard Xbox has failed to find a market in Japan. The consoles simply do not sell over there. From the beginning, there were problems. The original Xbox's giant Duke controller was seemingly deemed unsuitable for the Japanese market, so it was replaced with a much more compact and comfortable Controller S variation. Even with this change, the original Xbox didn't even make it past the 500,000 consoles sold mark in Japan, and this trend has never gotten any better. Sure, at their peak, the Xbox 360 sold 1.6 million consoles in Japan. That's great, sport, thanks for trying. However, the PlayStation 3 sold 10.47 million consoles, and then the Wii sold 12.75 million. Then the Xbox One came and went like a wet fart with a paltry 140,700 consoles. That's less consoles than there are people in the entire country of Guam. While things are looking better with the current generation of Xboxes selling far more, there's no real salvation here. Sony and Nintendo appeal worldwide to everyone. Xbox simply doesn't and completely misses an entire core market of gamers. Why that is, I honestly couldn't tell you. Is it the shitty marketing? Is it the kinds of games available? The focus on traditionally American-style shooters and hyper-violent games? The fact that it doesn't come from Japan and instead comes from a giant American company? I don't know. All I do know is that the numbers don't lie, and Microsoft needs to change something if they ever want to make the Xbox truly succeed overseas. The last point I want to touch on is the point that made me want to make this video in the first place. Xbox, in 2023, has no identity. Seriously, stop for a moment and think to yourself, what makes Xbox unique from the competition? Honestly, at this point, I can't really think of anything. Microsoft barely puts out any exclusive first-party titles that are must-buys that aren't made by developers they purchased in the past few years. The ones they do put out are typically generic live service garbage like Redfall and Halo Infinite. Yes, you have some exceptions like Hi-Fi Rush, but that really doesn't solve the problem. People latched onto Sony and Nintendo because they consistently put out strong experiences for their players. Nintendo has probably the biggest library of exclusive content out of all three, considering that they've been around for so long and have birthed so many franchises. Sony, ever since their very first PlayStation, has put a big emphasis on unique franchises, and more recently found a lot of success with larger cinematic games like The Last of Us and God of War. Whether you like these games or not, you can't deny that they make PlayStation unique in the console market space. There are reasons why people will buy a PlayStation over another console. Xbox doesn't have any of that energy in my opinion. they exude extreme generic gamer energy. When they do bother to do things that are original, it ends up coming out like Redfall, which was such a phenomenal clusterfuck that earned them a ton of backlash. Even the more interesting things of the most recent Xbox showcase didn't really excite me as much as anything from Sony or Nintendo. It doesn't really help that barely any of their games are truly exclusive anymore. They are either multi-platform games that are going to appear on other consoles anyway, or they'll be on PC. I love my PC, and the fact that these games come to PC, usually on day one, is great for me, but it just makes it even more baffling why Xbox still exists. Why bother buying the weaker console when you just get a PC that's more configurable, more powerful, and offers the same games anyway? That is, of course, up to the individual consumer, but I know which one I would choose. I think Microsoft needs to take a step back and really rethink what they're doing with the Xbox brand. They have the potential to be the best of the best considering their resources, but they consistently flounder their usage of them and just put out the most generic shit imaginable. In the Xbox 360 days, they put together a really great foundation and just destroyed it over time. Their place in the market is one that has to be earned. Sony and Nintendo didn't just magically become more successful than their many, many competitors in the 90s. They got there by making smart business moves and by making the best games. We tend to forget that, but at the end of the day, the games are all that matters. If Xbox can step it up and start making truly incredible, original games again, then I think they stand a chance. And, update, now that they seemingly are going to be able to buy Activision-Blizzard, I'm starting to think that my dream will never come to fruition. Xbox is just going to continue on this trend of buying up companies that already exist and never doing anything original of their own. Typical. Alright, now who wants to go play some Blinks the Time Sweeper?